It's February 6th, 2024, and we're bringing you the next installment of Real Estate Roundup. So since we already talked about Vancouver East Side, now we're going to jump to Vancouver West Side so we can see how that compares. We're always going to start, of course, with sales volume. In January, now we can talk January. We have the January stats already, being early February. In January 2024, we had 39 sales of detached homes. We're doing detached in the Vancouver West Side. So how does that compare? Last year, so January 2023, we had 25 sales. We're talking percentage-wise quite an uptick. So if you felt a little busier this January 2024, if you're a realtor or appraiser or mortgage lender, that's why. We're talking 56% increase. Of course, it's only 14 homes, but in terms of percentage, that's big. If we want to rewind now, January 2022, we had 66 sales. So of course, we're still down considerably from that, about 21%. But we're on an uptick. That last year was a drop, significant drop. So far, 2024, we're up. Now, that's sales volume, just over one a month. Detached homes, Vancouver West Side. We moved to prices. What's going on with prices? Just like with our real estate roundup, we're going to look at the HPI first. The HPI for the Vancouver West Side, January 2024 was 3.3 million. How does that compare? January 2023 was 3.142. So we are up from last year about 8%. So a little less than we saw in the Vancouver East Side, but that makes sense because we're at a higher price level. It's not going to increase at the same velocity or rate. January 2022, we were at 3.445. So we are actually still below what we were 2 years ago in Vancouver West Side. And if we jump back to January 2021, we were at 3.160. So we actually have sort of an up and down here. We went up from 21 to 22. Everybody knows how busy 2021 was. So that's no surprise. We're up a solid 10%. Then we came down a solid 10% in the year 2022. And then in the last year, from 2023 to 2024, we're up again 8%. So it's been an up and down story for the last 3-4 years in the Vancouver West Side. As usual, we want to talk about resales. Do the resales support the HPI? We did some digging and we have a few resales to bring up. First one I want to mention, 6656 East Boulevard. This home sold for $3 million in April 2022, resold for 3.1 September 2023. So it's barely moved, but it's been about 15-16 months. Why? Because we had that drop and increase. So they bought it in April 2022, down. The turnaround point for the HPI, by the way, was the end of the year. So in Jan 2023, is when it started going back up. As of from April to September, the net result was a wash. So 15 months, property value remained the same. Sort of interesting. The next one to mention, we're going to talk about 275 West 17th. This one, actually a little bit longer span than we would normally talk about in these segments. The property went from 3.4 million in 2021, August, to 3.9 million in January 2024. It's a recent sale. So we have about 15% increase in 2.5 years. So again, we have this up and down, which led to overall an increase, because if we go back to 2021, we were lower. Don't forget, this year was a banner year. If you bought in 2021, you got a good lift. The next paired sale to talk about today in the west side of Vancouver is 3847 West 30th. This is a home built in 07. It's another 2021 sale. It sold in 2021. And this was when the market was taken off. It sold for 3,890, so about 3.9 million. It resold in September 2023. So we're talking about 2.5 years. In those 2.5 years, it barely moved. It sold for 4 million. So why did it barely move? They bought it in 2021. They got a little bit more of a lift for that year. It went right down to 2023, back up again for 2023, and they let go in September, and they were at a wash. So again, a 2.5 year span, no increase. This up and down is very interesting. Of course, we know we had all these factors affecting things. I want to talk about 2918 West 32nd. We're going to talk about just two more here. I don't want to bore everybody, but it's interesting to bring these real life transactions. This home actually is one that sold initially in 2016 for 4.1, resold in 2023 for 4.1. So I found this one interesting. Of course, it's a longer span than we would normally talk about, 7 years. But over 7 years, it didn't really go up at all. Is that indicative of the HPI? It is. I'm looking at it right now. We were up here back in 2016. The market came down for the Vancouver West Side detached around 2018. As you remember, you had a nice dip and it didn't come back up until 2021. So if you bought in 2016 up to 2017, you bought at a peak. This property happened to buy in that peak. There may be some depreciation at play because the house was built in 2015. Interestingly enough, this 7 years did not bring any real increase to the overall property value. One more, 4222 West 15th, had to mention it, less than a block away from where I grew up in Point Grey. Built in 2015, initially sold Feb 3rd, 2022 for 4.1, resold September 2023 for 4.25. So again, we have a slight increase. Why? Because 2022 was a year where it went down, 2023 came back up. It was a wash. So we have 2023 closing out as a year of an increase of about 8%. We're definitely supported by our resales. We didn't really have any resales that perfectly timed the 2023 span, but we can tell from these that they support the HPI. The HPI is working. We had an increase that made up for the decrease the year before. The final segment, the final part of our real estate roundup for the Vancouver West Side detached, second to final, is going to be talking about inventory. At this time, we have 462 single family homes active inventory for sale as of actually January. And seems like a lot. If we had 39 sales last month, it sounds like 10 months. So it's not that unusual though. Let me go back and say what the inventory was a year ago. Remember, we had a busy year, 2023. We had an increase of 8%. We had 520 homes for sale in January 2023. 2022, which wasn't a great year, we had 560 for sale. If we go back to January 2021, we had 467. What is interesting? The amount of homes we have now in inventory is just that, actually slightly below the amount we had in 2021, which was a busy year. So what does this tell us? If I had to make a forecast right now, which I'm going to make a forecast right now, is we have increased prices coming 2024. Vancouver West Side detached, I see another 8%. I see it clearly. We have the lack of inventory. We have the interest rate cuts coming. We have the increased demand. And I do say, I really think it's going to play a factor is the redevelopment of single family lots. You can now add more units due to Bill 44, which in my other video talks about. I believe it's going to make an impression just because of the lack of inventory. If there's lots of lots, maybe not so much, but there's no question. We are headed towards a market increase 2024, barring some worldwide catastrophe. Fingers crossed, probably 8%.